Greetings, my fellow Sooners. This is Dot Cannon here. I am offering to you this very quick presentation. It's entitled Writing Tips in APA Format. Greetings again from lovely Seoul. And let's get started because I want to do it very quickly. I'm preparing this thing in Screencast-O-Matic, and actually I didn't sign in. Which doesn't matter because you can actually use Screencast-O-Matic without joining and paying for a subscription. You can record a presentation of upwards of 15 minutes, so I'm going to try to stick to that time limit in this presentation. Okay? So, this is an important first notion that we want to talk about, and that is what graduate research is really about. Now, according to the Excelsior College Intro to Graduate Writing Guide, graduate research involves engaging in a conversation requiring active reading. Emphasis mine. Active reading is when you read with intention. You want to find things that are supportive of your argument or that are important to your argument. Engaging in conversation requiring active reading, which involves learning and using a specialized language that is characterized by terminology and ideas familiar to researchers and scholars in a specific discipline. Our specific discipline is human relations, and in particular, diversity and social justice in organizations. The specific language that we are going to be using are words associated with the concepts that we've presented in this class. And what you guys are expected to do is to go and research other theories, other articles, other essays, and bring those to the classroom and support the arguments that you want to present using language that we are familiar with so that you can communicate with us in a manner that is beholding a graduate student. So I want you to keep this quote in mind as you do your research and think about what you're supposed to do in this class. Now, there's two types of research, and we're only going to engage in one of them. The first is primary research, which is our original studies. We're not going to do any experimentation. We're not going to do any surveys in this class because we simply don't have the time. But what we are going to use is secondary research, which is compiled research that is conducted by others, and we're going to apply it to our questions and our theories that we put forth in this class, okay? And that's where your papers fall into this area of using secondary research. Now, there's also two types of research papers. There's the analytical paper, where you develop an in-depth understanding of the topic. And yeah, we may do this, but more likely we're not going to use that approach. We're going to use the second one, which is argumentative. And that's basically where you present evidence that supports a point of view. Now, this is where almost all of you are going to be doing your research. Now, excuse me, I'm going to stop this presentation for 1 second. So folks, I know only a millisecond has passed since I said excuse me, and I apologize. Murphy's Law kicks in. This is the fourth time I've tried to put this together. I had to change it for a couple of reasons, and of course my low battery indicator came on in the middle of me speaking, but we're going to continue. So anyway, to get back on track, you folks will be using the argumentative style of research paper because you're primarily going to be presenting evidence that supports a point of view. Now, I want you to use APA format in your papers, and these are the expectations for your research papers, which are due at the end of the semester. Must have a title page and a references page. You must provide 5 to 7 pages of content, excluding the title page and references page. Now, when I say 5 pages, I don't mean 4.5 pages. Okay? When I say 7 pages, I don't mean 10 pages. Oftentimes, students will turn in a paper that's less than 5 pages. That will not be acceptable. 4.5 pages does not mean 5 pages. Oftentimes, students will turn in a paper that is 12 pages. Oftentimes, those papers are recycled. That is not acceptable. The paper length is 5 to 7 pages. Why 5 to 7 pages? Because it's not that easy to write a paper that's 5 to 7 pages. Okay? You have to be concise, you have to get to your point, you have to organize your paper really well, and you have to direct your thoughts. Okay? No abstract is required for a paper of this length. Oftentimes when people write an abstract, they will actually be writing an introduction, which they should include in their paper as opposed to the abstract. If I were to ask you for an abstract, I would direct you with this notion that your abstract should be no longer than 100 words. Why? Because it helps people to stay concise. The abstract is only supposed to be a very quick summary of what your paper is about. It's not supposed to introduce your paper. The papers have to be double-spaced. They have to be written in Times New Roman 12-point font. And they have to include 1-inch margins, okay? Now, we'll get to example APA format paper later on. So, the old axiom holds true in terms of writing a paper, and you probably learned this in high school. You want to say what you're going to say, you want to say it, and you want to say it again. It's very simple. Every paper that's ever written basically follows this format. And here's a typical format of your graduate paper. You're going to have an introduction where you say what you are going to say. In this paper, I'm going to talk about X, and I'm going to provide 3 points of support for X. You want to provide some background. You want to have a literature review, basically telling the reader what has already been written about X that you want to talk about. You know, researcher Smith said of X, blah, 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 blah. Researcher Jones said of X, blah, 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 blah. You want to give some supporting evidence of what you're trying to prove. X applies to this circumstances relating to diversity and social justice. You want to provide a discussion. Now, here are some future implementations of X as it pertains to diversity and social justice. And here are some recommendations for future studies of X or as it pertains to diversity and social justice. X has not been studied in the prison population. X has not been studied in a population of immigrants. I recommend that it is done in that manner. And I'm making this up as I go along. And then you want to have a conclusion, and in that conclusion, you want to say again what you intended, what you said in your introduction. In conclusion, this paper discussed X as it applies to diversity and social justice. We offered recommendations as to how X should be implemented, and we also provided some recommendations of future studies of X. That is all you need to do in terms of your paper. You want to have an introduction, you want to talk a little bit about background, you want to have some supporting evidence of what you're trying to prove, you want to discuss the issue. This is where you get to apply your opinion, and then you want to offer a conclusion. Okay. Now, sources of research material, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Basically, use your OU library because it's an absolutely fantastic resource. Okay. So you can pause and look at these as you please. Okay. Primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Now, here are things you want to avoid in your paper. You want to avoid using military jargon because not everybody understands military jargon. You want to avoid acronyms because acronyms are also something that most people don't understand. Run-on sentences. If you feel like if there are so many thoughts in your sentence, this probably means that your one sentence is way too long. If it's over 30 words, it's way too long. Cut it down, make it into chunks, okay? Perfectly acceptable for a graduate paper. Paragraphs have multiple thought streams. There are times when I receive papers from students where I'll look at a page and it's one paragraph. If you find yourself doing that, you're probably putting multiple thoughts into one paragraph. Break it up. Typically, your paragraphs are not going to be more than a third of a page long. Short paragraphs are perfectly okay. All right? Naked citations, and this is the really big one. People will put a citation in a paper and not support it with their own thoughts. That's completely unacceptable. I don't want to know what the researcher thinks. I want to know what you learned from that researcher. Better than putting a citation into a paper, it's more important that you paraphrase what you learned from a researcher. If Jones and Smith said that X, Y, and Z were true, it's better that you tell me as opposed to copying what and pasting what Jones and Smith said, plopping it in a paper, and then not providing any of your original thoughts as to how that relates to your topic, okay? It's more important to hear what you have to say than it is to hear what Jones and Smith said. Support those with your original thoughts. Disagreement of pronouns, that is unacceptable. If you're talking about Mr. Smith, and then you said they were shopping, you follow up a reference to Mr. Smith with a they, that's a disagreement of a pronoun, okay? And then sentences with clauses, with or to or for or other prepositions, those are no-nos. Uses of parenthetical statements, I'm not gonna get into that too much because I don't think you guys do those, but you can use those if it helps with the understanding of a sentence. But the parenthetical phrases is something that can be taken out of the sentence and the sentence will still make sense, but sometimes it adds meaning to what you're going to say. So you can pause this and take a look at this if you want. Metaphors and similes, you want to avoid these, okay? That's not for academic papers. That's more for expository writing and essays. Things like strong as an ox, rolled off his back, blink of an eye, thrown his way night and day, soaking, ups and downs, over the moon, trials and tribulations, other things like that. I can't think of anything right now, but please don't put those in your academic papers, okay? Things to include. Strong introductory sentences. It's okay. Say what you're going to say in a paragraph. It's okay, all right? Descriptive sentences. You can give descriptive sentences. Mr. Smith was a tall man of stout bearing with gray hair and gray eyes. That's okay. That's allowed. References integrated into the text. You can integrate your text, your references into what you're writing without including the entire sentence. So if you include 5 words from a quote of Smith into a sentence that you're writing, that's perfectly okay. You don't always have to just shove an entire quote into a paper. All right? Follow on text after quotes. If you put a quote in the paper, tell me what it means. Okay? Don't just put a quote. That's a naked citation. That's unacceptable. All right? Capitalized soldier, that means that when you refer to a military member like soldier, it's capitalized. It's a show of respect. And again, as I said previously, short paragraphs are completely okay. Now, this is my favorite APA citing site, the OWL at Purdue. You can Google it and it will take you there, and it's a really, really wonderful place to cite for guidance on how to do citations, okay? And OU has a writing center. You can also Google that and find out where it is. They will actually proof your paper if you want them to do that. More importantly, use your peers, okay? So to talk about the format again, introduction, background, supporting evidence, discussion, conclusion. Say what you're going to say it, and say it again, okay? So that's a conclusion on writing tips. I will probably download a APA format paper from the OWL and send it to you, but it's a really good reference where you can go and find out how to cite something. Now, the OU library has some good tips on citing things, and I'll show you that in a different presentation. But it's important that if you're going to go to a website, that you learn how to properly cite it, okay, in APA format. So, that concludes this presentation. Thank you for listening, and I hope these tips will help you in preparing your final papers.